Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here on this stage, and this time with the very eminent Anne Cleeves. I think you would know her by many epithets. She's the queen of crime, modern-day Agatha Christie, and many more. So I think let's give a round of applause, please, first, and welcome her to India. And It's your first time to India, from what I understand.
It is, and I'm just so moved by the welcome I've had. After the previous panel, I feel rather ashamed to be British. And if my government won't apologise for what we did to you in the past, I am very, very happy to apologise on their behalf. So thank you.
That's very, very gracious. Well, at least we got the memorial, right? And while I was researching, of course, we're familiar with the books, and both the Vera series and the Shetland series, enormous success, have gone on to become very successful TV shows as well. But when I was reading and I was researching a little bit about your life and how you started writing, well, I found two interesting facts. One might be of interest only to me, which is that Anne and I share a birthday. But the second thing that I found quite interesting was that, Anne, when you started writing, and tell me if I've got this right, when you started writing, it was just you and your husband that had found themselves on an island, and it was just the two of you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, it wasn't one of the Shetland Islands, though that is where I met my husband when I was working in Shetland. But he was a bird watcher, very passionate about natural history, and he went on to become a warden of a nature reserve. And the nature reserve where we first met was a tiny tidal island called Hilbury. And we were the only people living there. No mains water, no mains electricity. We lived in a very old cottage there. And if you're not into birds, and I'm really, really not, there's not much else to do. So that's when I started writing. And it is not a coincidence that in the first book I kill off a bird watcher. It saved our marriage.
That's great. Now, of course, the Vera series has 8 books.
Yes.
And but I was reading somewhere when you said, Vera herself as a character just sort of strode on to stage when you were writing The Crow Trap, I think it was. Now, as you've spent a lot of time with her.
I have.
She's been with you for 8 books. Did you expect her to be with you for this long?
She's been with me for 8 books, and she's actually 21 this year. So this is the 21st year of writing about Vera. And luckily, she doesn't age in real time in the book, so I can carry on writing about her. Yet I had a very young editor who said to me that traditional crime fiction is dead. Nobody will read it anymore. What we want from you is a big, new, standalone novel of suspense. So I started writing this novel, which definitely wasn't going to have a detective in it. I never plot in advance. And about a third of the way through, I got really stuck. I didn't know where I was going to go with the story. And I think it was the American thriller writer Raymond Chandler who said, if you're stuck with a plot, have a guy burst through a door with a gun. I don't do guns because I'm British, so I just had a door burst open. I was writing a funeral scene, this little chapel in the hills, so the door burst open, and it was one of those miraculous moments that sometimes happen when you're writing. In burst Vera Stanhope. She came with her name. I describe her as looking more like a bag lady than a detective, which is how she remains in the books, very shambolic, carrying all her papers in a plastic carrier bag instead of a briefcase. And that's really...
It's like a bag lady almost.
A bit like a bag lady, yeah, absolutely. Like looking very much like a bag lady. But when you pick back where she might have come from, I was born in the mid-50s. We might have the same birthday, but unfortunately not the same year. And in the small town where I lived, there were lots of formidable spinsters. Women who'd never married, because it was not that long after the Second World War. They'd either lost sweethearts in the war, or they'd been allowed roles and responsibilities that they might not otherwise have had. And these women were very competent. You maybe have Indian single women like this too, I'm sure. Very competent, very authoritative, didn't care at all what they looked like, made things happen. And I think that's actually where Vera came from.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like when she arrived, so to speak, she almost arrived fully formed.
Absolutely fully formed, yes. And luckily, that young editor married a music journalist and moved to Australia. So after that, I could write more Veras. And I was allowed.
Have you spoken to this young editor since? And what does she think of the
Never seen her since. I don't regret that.
Right. So Vera now, as we all know, and in fact, we were talking just a little while earlier, and mentioned that she met someone who had watched the TV series and didn't actually realize that it was based on a book. So, stepping for a moment onto the TV series, we're all watching far too much of it, I'd say. But
no, you can't watch too much Vera. She's brilliant. She stars double Oscar nominee Brenda Blethyn.
Right.
If you've seen the film Secrets and Lies, she was nominated for that, and Little Voice she was in. So watch the TV if you can find it.
I'm sort of interested because you're still writing. You're still writing these characters, or you were while the series was still on. So how does that, when you're watching a character that you've written and you've built and you've imagined and you're watching that character then play out on television, how does that sort of inform the trajectory of the character in your own narrative, or does it? Is there dialogue there?
I think it does, because Brenda, who plays her, is a brilliant actor, and I do hear her voice now when I'm writing dialogue.
Right.
I don't see her. The real life Brenda is very glamorous and very elegant and doesn't look a bit like my Vera. She dresses very shabbily in the show, but she doesn't look like my Vera. But I hear her voice, and sometimes I'll write a line and think, oh, I hope the script writers keep that in, because Bren's going to love saying that.
And do they?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they do, yeah. And I'm very happy to hand the books over to the script writers and just let them get on with it.
That's interesting. Switching gears for a moment, away from the success of it. I was. You're here, of course, today as a very celebrated writer, very successful in your craft, several successful series, TV shows, all of it, and it struck me that in one of your interviews you had said, for the first 20 years while I was writing, no one had heard of me.
That's
and
right.
I wanted to sort of talk about that for a minute, because I suspect that many of us here in the audience we're certainly readers. There might even be some writers in the audience, and sometimes there is a loneliness to writing. It's something that you have to do in solitude almost. And so I want to ask you about that. Away from the success, away from the ArcLight, away from all of that. How do you keep writing for those 20 years when you were writing and you hadn't really found your reader yet? How and why did you keep on writing?
I love it. I get up in the morning very early. I sit at my kitchen table in my pajamas, mostly, drink lots of tea, and I tell stories. And that's what we're hardwired to do, I think, as humans. As kids, you pretend to be somebody else. In your head, you're playing in the playground. And that's I'm being paid to just make stuff up for a living. I mean, how wonderful is that? It's brilliant. And even though I did have a mainstream publisher for those 20 years, but I sold very, very few books. But I would have carried on writing even if I didn't have a publisher at all. And you're right, it is lonely. And one of the things that we did, I'm in a group called Murder Squad, and there are 8 of us who are all writers of crime, all based in the north of England. And we became a kind of co-op or a support group for each other. So when one of us was doing really well, they would support the others in the group. And it's much easier to promote other people's books than it is to promote your own. I am a shy Brit. I can't do the getting up and selling myself thing. But I'm very happy to go to an audience and talk about how brilliant Cass Staincliffe is, or what a wonderful writer Martin Edwards is about the Golden Age. So that works much better, I think. And we did find that if we went into a bookshop and the assistant said, who is it? sort of disdainfully, because they didn't know at all who you were. If you said Murder Squad, they were much more likely to get the manager than if we just said our individual names.
Well, um, staying on that for a second, now that you've had this tremendous success, does it change your writing at all, or are you more aware of an audience now that your books are being received so brilliantly all over the world? Or can you still sit in your pajamas with your cup of tea in the morning?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I can do that without guilt, because before I had a day job and had to rush off and earn a living, but now I can do it guilt-free. I love it. And I think because I had those 20 years of learning my craft, of writing every day, of not being under any pressure at all from publishers or from the media, I think that helped really, because I'm quite grounded and I love what I do and I don't feel that I have any pressure put on me, and I just enjoy telling those stories. I think it's very much harder now for young writers who are published, because you are expected to be a success immediately. Right. And to get a huge advance and then maybe not earn it back, not live up to it, that must be really tough, I think, because that puts so much pressure on the writer, the young writer. And you're seen maybe as a failure, even though your book might be tremendous, just because it's not immediately commercially successful.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the pressure is real, and the idea of instant coffee is something that we're all sort of, falling prey to. So that's great. And it sounds like you don't drink coffee anyway, so you're drinking tea. So you're safe from that.
Mostly tea, I think.
So you're safe from that.
And I'm very, very grateful to public libraries, because without them, there is no way I would still be writing. Without those readers and the library staff who recommended, hand-sold them to people, and who set up reading groups and recommended them, and to small independent bookshops, because the big stores wouldn't stock my books at all, but the small indies would take a chance on stocking a few copies.
That's fantastic.
And I think that's... Can I just tell a story about how they came to be on television? The first Vera book is called The Crow Trap, and that didn't sell very well at all. And so there are lots of the books remained and ended up in second-hand bookshops. And one ended up in a charity shop, an Oxfam shop in North London. And somebody came in to buy it to take on holiday. And most writers are a bit sniffy about second-hand bookshops, because you don't get any money out of the books that are sold there. But this person went in, bought the book to take on holiday. Nothing at all unusual about that, except the woman who bought it was called Elaine Collins, and she was books executive for ITV Studios. And they were looking for a show for a Sunday night with a strong female lead, and that's how Vera came to be on the television, because there was a book in an Oxfam shop in North London.
That's a great story.
It is a good story.
That's a great story.
So it's all about luck. If you're a writer out there and you're struggling and things aren't going too well, don't be downhearted. Just keep going, believe in what you're doing, tell your stories, enjoy what you're doing, write for yourself, not for some audience that you think, some readership that might be out there. And with a bit of luck, it might happen for you too.
That's fantastic. That's a tremendous story. But staying on, I've got the image in my mind of you and your kitchen table, drinking your tea in your pajamas and writing away. But tell me this, I don't know about, I think actually I'm speaking for most of us here when I say that when I come to the end of any of your books, I am tremendously surprised. And I try to work it out, but I never really can figure out who the murderer is until you tell me. But tell me this, do you, when you start writing, when you're plotting your novel, or do you plot your novel, do you know who the murderer is?
No, because I've made no money out of it for the first 20 years, it had to be fun. And where would be the fun of writing if you knew how it was going to end? So, no, I don't know at all. I don't plot in advance. I don't know how it's going to end. I need that slight scariness to keep me going, I think. And I love the cheap thrill of the surprise ending of traditional crime fiction. I know it's a cheap thrill, but if I can do it, I love it as a reader, and I very much enjoy doing it as a writer if I can.
And you pull it off every single time, every single time. The other thing that I was thinking about is, going back to the island, was about how geography is really a character in your books, isn't it? the ruggedness of the landscapes, the sort of the sheer magnitude of it all. It's not just a pretty landscape. It almost becomes a character in your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think we grow out of the places where we were born and where we were lived. My daughter's an academic. She's a human geographer, researching communities and the individual's place within a community. And I think that's what I do, really. I can't imagine Vera having lived anywhere else other than that bleak Northumberland hillside. Jimmy Perez, I don't think could have come from anywhere other than Shetland. And I love writing about places with big skies and long horizons, because there's a great contrast between that and then the secrets that might be hidden underneath. You think that you can see everything in these places. Right. There are no trees in Shetland. It's a tiny group of islands right up at the north of England, of Scotland, and it's on the same line of latitude as bits of Alaska and bits of Greenland. And people don't realise that there is a place in the UK that's that far north. Yeah. So there are no trees. It's very bleak. And the thought that there might be something hidden in there, I love that contrast. That's what I enjoy writing.
So coming to, we talked a little bit about how the character of Vera was born, and she arrived, like you said, fully formed, sort of strode on to the stage, as it were, and you knew. Can you tell us a little bit about Jimmy Perez and how he was born?
Jimmy Perez came about because I lived in Shetland. I lived on the tiny island of Fair Isle in Shetland for 2 years. And Fair Isle, most people know about Fair Isle is the knitting. Yes. You know the knitting? Yeah. And still people knit there. Even I knitted while I was there. But I was cooking in a bird observatory for bird watchers, which is how I met my husband. But after 2 years, we left, we went away. But as I've explained, my husband was a very passionate bird watcher. And a very rare bird turned up in Shetland between Christmas and New Year one year. And I hadn't given him a terribly exciting Christmas present, so my Christmas present to him was that we would day trip Shetland to see this bird. Mad, crazy. It's 14 hours on the boat from Aberdeen to Shetland. It's an overnight boat trip. So we had to drive up to Aberdeen, overnight on the boat to Shetland. We arrived into Shetland early in the morning. It had snowed and then frozen on top of the snow. Beautiful, beautiful day. And there are lots of ravens in Shetland. So these black ravens, very black against the snow. And because I'm a crime writer, I thought, if there was blood as well, it would be mythic, like a fairy story, like Snow White or Sleeping Beauty. And that's how the first book in the Shetland series, Raven Black, came to be written. And the book, really, the theme of the book is about how we belong and what it takes to belong and what it is to be an outsider. And so I wanted a central character who belonged but also didn't quite belong. So I made him a Fair Islander because most Shetlanders think Fair Isle is the end of the known universe because there's an equally horrible boat to get you to Fair Isle. And then I gave him the Spanish name, Perez, because there was a Spanish Armada ship wrecked off Fair Isle in the 16th century. So it's not outside the bounds of possibilities that one of the 60 survivors married a local woman that the name continued. And so that's why he's called Jimmy Perez, and that's how he was born.
Did you ever see the bird?
Oh, we did.
Oh,
yes. Good. It was, what was it? Oh, it was an American coot, which is very, very like a British coot. But my husband was very excited. My husband came to India long, even before I met him, and he did. It was the time when you could do the overland trip through Europe, and then through Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan, and came to India, not to do the hippie trail thing, but to do the bird watching thing. And there was a famous naturalist called Salim Ali, and he came to meet Salim Ali. And he did that long trip with 3 friends. And one of the greatest moments of his life was meeting Salim Ali.
That's fantastic.
So I always wanted to come, but I've never been before. So here I am.
And here you are. And what does it feel like, actually? What does it feel like? We're talking about these landscapes where, like you said, there's hardly even a tree in sight. And so we're as far removed from those landscapes as we could possibly be, right? Sitting here in this wonderful country. So what does it feel like to realize and to see that your books really have traveled this far.
It's
And
quite weird to think about people reading about Shetland
Yes.
so far north here in Kolkata. But don't you think stories are universal? They might be different and the settings might be different, but we love a story. And often, in great literature as well as popular fiction, there is usually a death and there's usually secrets that are hidden.
yes.
And there are people who are feeling betrayed and people who are feeling lonely. And that's what we're writing. And I think those themes are universal.
Absolutely. I mean, I think those emotions are universal. Those characters can be, in some sense, written anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's quite staggering to see that these books really have traveled as well as they have. It's absolutely fantastic.
I'm just thinking Vera could be one of your girl power girls, but
She
older.
could.
But
She
older.
could. Vera could be Nita or something like that. Absolutely. Why not? Now, and I didn't know this, and I'm actually curious. We were talking a little while earlier, and Anne mentioned that she's got a new series coming out that is neither Vera nor Shetland.
Shall I wave the book?
So please tell us more. The rest of us have been waiting for some next installment to come along, and now you've got this. So please tell us.
Yes, I'll still be writing the Vera books, but The Long Call is set in North Devon, which is where I grew up. And this came about because I was talking to this lady in the front just a little while ago. 2 years ago, my husband died very suddenly, and I needed to run away from home, from the north of England. And where I ran to was where I'd been very happy, back to my childhood home of North Devon. And I stayed with a friend, and I was talking to her, and that was where the story grew. It grew out of conversations with her because she'd grown up in quite a religious, a strict evangelical Christian sect. And she'd been talking about this, and it just occurred to me what it would be like if you lost your faith when you'd grown up with such certainty, if you were the only child of doting parents, and you've been brought up maybe to think that you were going to be the next leader of your community, and then very publicly to lose your faith. And that's what happens to Matthew Venn. And he goes away, and his way of, I think, finding that sense of community and family and even redemption is to join the police force, because he can find those things as a member of the police. And then circumstances, he falls in love with another man. He has a husband. It's a gay couple. He goes back to North Devon of his childhood and knocks again against this quite strict religious community where obviously his sexuality is a big problem. So that's how the story starts. And I'm very fond of him and of the books, and there will be more.
That's absolutely fascinating. And what Anne isn't telling you, but because she's very she sounds very, very humble, is that this has also been picked up for TV. Is that right?
Yes, by the same company that
Excellent.
makes Vera in Shetland.
So that's very, very exciting news. Congratulations.
No, it's very greedy, and everywhere in the UK, crime writers have got little wax models of me, and they're sticking pins in. And I know that if it is made, part of me will be, of course, delighted, but part of me will be mortified.
Why?
Well, it's just there are so many brilliant crime writers out there who haven't had my luck, so it doesn't seem very fair.
Or your talent, shall we say.
Well,
but that's wonderful. I know there are many questions in the audience. We've got, I think, a few sort of eager questions right here in the front. So I don't want to take up more time. If we can have the microphones, please, to go around so that the rest of us can hear the question as well. And then we can take a few questions from the audience. Is there a
lots
microphone?
of questions.
Lots of questions. Is there a microphone that can... Yeah, thank you. We'll just wait for a minute for the mics to go around, and then you can ask your question.
Or unless you can shout, and we'll repeat it. Would you like to shout?
Go
You on
ahead.
the front.
Just let's have the lady in the front, and then
And then we'll come
you.
to you then. Promise. Yeah. So the question is, did I write any of the screenplays for Shetland? No, I don't write I was very happy to hand the books over to the to hand the books over to the production team. I know nothing about making television. It seemed to me that it would be more sensible to hand the books over and let people who know what they're doing get on with it.
But you never, you never had any apprehensions that they wouldn't stick to the character that you'd.
The
You know,
question
you're quite
was,
possessive about your characters.
yeah, the question is, did I have any apprehension about doing that? No, because I trusted the production team. The person who bought the book, who found it in the charity shop, I knew that she was a great reader, and I could tell that she understood my character. And the rest of it, I don't care if they change the murderer, or if they bring in characters, or they cut out characters. I don't care about that. They got the central character right, and they agreed to film where the books are set. And that was the most important. We have the guy there, yeah, who stood up before. Yeah.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Over the years, we have seen that for the purpose of television, the books have been changed and altered so that the main characters, lead characters of the books, have to be modified. We have seen with, in case of Agatha Christie's Merple, in 1984, it was true to the book, and in ITV, whatever they have done in 2008 was very different.
Yeah.
Would you be okay with anyone tinkering with your books in the future, or do you have a strict agreement with them that the books have to be sacrosanct?
No, I don't have any agreement with them about the books. I trust the lead characters, the actors who play Vera and Dougie Henshaw, who plays Perez. They understand the characters. I think that I've had the creative freedom in doing what I love doing and telling the stories. And I think that filmmakers should be allowed the same creative freedom to do what they do well. Because of that, because I don't meddle, we get on very, very well. I'm always invited to the read-throughs. I'm always made welcome on set. I'm even invited to the wrap parties, which is fabulous. And I think that that's the best way to do it. It's a different form. Prose is a very different form from filmmaking.
And they've translated very well to the
Yes, they
filmmaker's
have.
credit.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah.
As a British writer, it is a big challenge because it's already, you have been coming from a long tradition of Sherlock Holmes and all. So these father figures which have been created, has they pose a kind of challenge when you are being writing, or to write differently from what they have written?
I don't think so. I did grow up reading all those Golden Age books, and there is very much a sense of standing on the shoulders of heroes. You know, we learn from those. But and the first few books that I wrote were amateur sleuths. They were wealthy people, because I thought that's what crime fiction had to be. But then I started reading much more contemporary fiction, like John Harvey, Ian Rankin, and I thought they don't have to be wealthy. They can be like me. And I think my writing
Pre-TV,
changed
I'm
then.
sure, though.
Sorry?
No.
Yeah, they can be, yeah, me pre-TV. So, yeah, so I think that I'm much more honest in my writing more recently. And that's what I think is very important. I can still write within the structure and the framework of the traditional crime fiction, but I hope I bring contemporary sensibilities to it. I don't think Agatha Christie would have had a gay detective.
Ma'am, since we were talking about just, being contemporary and being contextual, just a very quick generic question. We see the modern day sleuth is being more and more created to be more vulnerable, more fallible, more believable, like the man next door, rather than a superhero. I mean, you mentioned Ian Rankin just now, maybe Ian Rankin, Peter Robinson, the whole
Yes.
genre of Scandinavian crime writers. I mean, when you
Yes.
talk about police procedures now, very believable, very vulnerable. Do you think it's a very conscious stream of activity on behalf of the authors to create them like this, so which actually contributed to this massive success of modern day police procedure stories as a genre?
I think so, because we want characters that we can engage with. And I think that in some cases, I find Agatha Christie, for instance, very cold, very ruthless. She wants to know about revenge. She doesn't mind killing schoolgirls. She has serial killers. I don't want to write about monsters. I'm not interested in writing about monsters. I want to understand why people do what they do. I trained as a social worker and I worked as a probation officer. So I've met murderers. And I think that that gives me a context as well. And I've met victims.
I think we've got a few questions in the middle there.
Just one more question, please. So the lady with the microphone, you're the lucky one.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to introduce your writing to a young girl of 14.
Yes.
Which book should I start with?
Start with Raven Black, which is the first of the Shetland books. It is about, as I say, that need to belong. And I think every teenage girl feels that need to belong. They're not pretty enough, or they're not skinny enough, or their friends don't like them enough. And I think that's very much the theme of that book. And I would recommend that one to start with.
Thank you. That has been a help.
The search for identity.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
I think we have to stop now to allow other people to speak. I will be signing books, and I'll be around, so come and chat to me individually if you have questions. I'd love to speak to you, and I'll be at the bookshop.
Well, thank you very much,
And
Anne.
thanks
and
so
no,
much
not
to
at all.
you.
Thank you, and again, a warm welcome to India. May this be the first of many.
Oh, just have me back. Invite me back. I'm loving it. I've only been here 2 days, and I feel so at home, so thank you.
Raven Black sounds just like the book that I would want to read again. Identity plagues all of us. Questions. Thank you, first of all, for a fantastic session. We have a small token of gratitude for the two of you from Tata Steel. This is just a bonsai, just a small gesture, Tata Steel's resolve of enabling a better tomorrow, as well as appreciation and thanks. That does look like a bonsai. Thanks for your contribution to the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Neha. And it is time for the next session.